was Albert Einstein that first stated that everybody can be a genius, but if you judge a fish by his ability to climb a tree, he'll spend the rest of his life thinking he's stupid. We've created social norms, societal cycles, standards of cultures, but unfortunately not everybody fits in them. And when they don't fit in, we penalise and punish them. I'm going to tell you a story about a young kid growing up in Ballymun. At a very young age, he struggled with the first part of the cycle, the education system. He was the class clown. He was put outside the door a lot. The parents were called to school a lot. He was suspended. He mitched from school. So those that don't know what mitching is, he was meant to be in school, but he wasn't. The parents thought he was there. And he grew up in Ballymun in the 80s. And growing up in Ballymun in the 80s was quite difficult because of the heroin epidemic that hit the country. Ballymun wasn't equipped, the country wasn't equipped to deal with it. And with the addiction problems and the drug problems came crime. So this kid and his two friends had two options. They decided either they have to protect themselves, be able to handle themselves if trouble came knocking, or they were going to get protection off an older group of guys. And that's what they did. They decided to get protection off the guys that were from their area, and that's how they were going to get through life and feel protected and feel safe. For that protection, they had to do certain chores. So, for example, they'd sit on the back of the blocks, and at the back of the blocks, the big massive field that led to a wall. And the next community to Ballymun was Glasnevin. So Ballymun actually had a wall that divided social class. These kids getting over the wall from Glasnevin, they were going into Ballymun for a particular reason, to buy drugs. And they'd see these kids sitting on the blocks, and they go, right, okay, we'll go over to them because they'll tell us where to get drugs and they won't rob us. And the kids sitting on the blocks would see these kids coming across the field and they go, right, they're going to be looking for drugs. They'd come over to the kids from Ballymun and say, where we get drugs? And they'd say, go to the back of the blocks, there'll be a guy standing there, he'll give you drugs. And they'd go through, and as you can all imagine, they'd get robbed. So there's a lesson in that. Ballymun kids helped Glasnevin kids stay off drugs. But at the age of 14, this kid and his two friends got into a lift. And kids in Ballymun realised that a very early development of Ballymun that you could lock the lifts. So they went up to a certain floor, they locked the lift, and the older guy that they felt they were getting protection off put his hand out with a substance in it and said, do you want a bit of this? And they said, what is it? And he said, H. So they took the drug. They got out of the lift. This kid and his two friends walked one way and the older guy went the other direction. And they said to each other, what did we just take there? And he said, we took liquid hash. And it wasn't until further down the line when they were offered heroin and they took another hit of heroin that they realised it wasn't their first hit. That day in the lift at the age of 14 was their first hit of heroin. The older guys that they were getting protection off, they went deeper into addiction and crime. And this kid then fell into the second cycle, the penal system. So he ended up in St. Pat's. He went into St. Pat's on drugs, took drugs in St. Pat's, and when he came out, nothing had changed. He was still on drugs. And in many ways, it was a proud moment to him because when he went back to the older guys, he felt he had his initiation to the group, that he'd done time. He then went deeper into addiction, became a heroin addict, and he became a functional addict because when he came out of St. Pat's, he was working that fed his habit. And eventually, drugs took a toll on his physical appearance, and he lost his job. The second part of an addict to feed their habit, they will steal from the home. So the parents eventually said, look, if we keep allowing you to stay here and you keep stealing from the home, we'll keep feeding your habit and we're potentially killing you. So they evicted him from the house and he became homeless. So the next part of that then, when an addict becomes homeless, they have a 20 to 30,000 euro habit a year to feed. They start committing crime. And then he goes down the route. Once he starts committing crime, the second part of the penal system ended up in prison. Same as St. Pat's, went in on drugs, took drugs in prison, And as he came out, he was still on drugs. Nothing had changed. When he reintegrated into society, when he came out of prison, a lot of the older guys that he was getting protection off went their separate ways. Some were still on drugs, some were in prison. 3 of them died and overdosed. And it got to the stage where the family said, you know what, we need to do something different here. His best friend had been clean for 2 years. He had a row with his girlfriend, went back to his house, slipped, took 1 hit of heroin and died. And the family said, let's get him out of this country. It's the environment, it's Ballymon. So they sent him over to London, and it worked because he didn't know any other addicts, he didn't know any other drug dealers, and he became clean. And he tried to reintegrate into society over there. He tried to make new friends. He tried to get a job. But he was always stumbling when it came to reintegrating into society. His physical appearance had changed, the tone of his voice had changed from the drugs. So what did he do? He went back to the people he felt comfortable with, the people that respected him, other addicts. He went back on drugs. And for about 4 years, he went on that cycle of going on methadone, back onto heroin. And in 2012, he was 5 days away from going to rehabilitation for methadone, and he died from a heart arrhythmia at the age of 31. Little did he know that the bad choices he made in life would have an impact on his younger brother. And his younger brother was 7 years younger than him. And his younger brother picked up a football, kicked it off the flats to get closer to him, because he wanted to hang around with his older brother and the cool kids. But then his younger brother used to go up to his parents and say he's down there drinking, smoking, or doing whatever. And his mom and dad would give him money for sweets, so his brother was a little rat, little informant. But his brother picking up the football helped him play football in primary school, helped him play football for his local GAA club, but more importantly, helped his younger brother to challenge his standards of his culture. Because his younger brother could have went down the exact same route. He could have ended up in drugs, he could have committed crime. So he challenged the standards of his culture. And his younger brother went on to do a degree, set up his own company, to want to play for Dublin, to win All-Ireland. And more importantly, his brother went on to set up a charity for high-risk youths and drug addicts in his brother's legacy. So for those who don't know who I'm talking about, I'm the younger brother, and the kid I started the story with is my older brother, John. And that's my halftime talk. And a halftime talk is when something significant in your life changes the standards of your life. If you look at my sport, GAA, you play a first half, you go into halftime, you play a second half. When you go into halftime, you reflect on your first half. What did you do good? What did you do bad? And you go out and you try performing a better second half. I thought I was living a good life. I challenged the standards of my culture. I was employed. I'd won my first All-Ireland in 2011. John passed in 2012. When John passed, it ignited something inside me, a purpose in life. A purpose to try break the cycle that John went through, or to break a cycle that my family went through. I came across a brilliant analogy. And if we think Ireland as a big, massive pond, and within the pond, we have dirty pockets. And the dirty pockets represent communities that struggle with low employment rates, high crime, high addiction, and overall low opportunity rates. And within them dirty pockets, we have dirty fish. And the dirty fish don't fit in. They don't fit into what we've created. And what we try to do with the dirty fish is we try to filter them. We try to put them through systems to make them clean fish. So when they go back into these dirty pockets, that they have an impact in their communities. And I'll start off where the first filter is the education system. So they start off, if somebody doesn't fit into the education system, they have different options. You have Leaving Cert Deployed now, you have Youth Reach, you have FOSS, John went through Balark, you've a good few options. But what happens after that? What happens if the kid completely disengages with the education system and starts committing crime. John went to Pat's. Now you have Oberstown, a €22 million running cost facility, child detention centre. €340,000 a year spent per youth. So essentially what we're saying is that we will wait till you get to that level and then we start investing in you. I want you to think of something. 2 years, a kid spending 2 years in Oberstown, €680,000. There's a high rate of kids going on to prison after that phase of their life. €90,000 a year for a prisoner. That's the running cost for a prisoner. So let's say a kid is 2 years in Oberstown and then goes on to do 5 years in here, Mountjoy. We're up to €1 million now. And there's a good chance that that kid's brother or sister or father or mother have went through that cycle. Now we're up to 2 or 3 million. So the first big thing, the first big lesson for me in this cycle is how can we invest smartly into the communities that need it, into these dirty pockets. So I'm very fortunate. I was playing a match one day and I actually lost, so I wasn't very fortunate. And I was signing a couple of jerseys for kids, and this man was walking towards me, and I was in the bad humour. That's as far as I'll go. And he said to me, I'm Governor Mullins. Would you come in to Mountjoy and do a talk? And I was like, I'm at the losing the match here, like, you know. So a couple of days later, so just get in contact with me in a couple of days, and a couple of days later he did. And I was blown away that this governor would make an effort to get me to come in and do a talk for prisoners. So I had to do it. And I did it, and that led into doing some fitness classes. And I was doing fitness classes in the main jail, in A and B in protection, and I was doing fitness classes here in the progression unit. And there was a stark difference in culture. And I went back to Governor Mullins and I said, you know what? We got to shine a light on this. There is good things happening up here in this progression unit. We need to set up something. I didn't know what that was at the time, but I knew there was something culturally that was different between the two areas. So excuse my language, but that was when the Unfucked movement was born. And the Unfucked is spelled UNFUCCCKED. And the CCC stands for Culture Change Community. It was a program or a movement facilitated by me, developed by prisoners for prisoners. And the objective at the beginning was ultimately to impact the individual, to change the values, the behaviors, the self-beliefs, and that when they reintegrated into society, that they were different. They were a little bit different. They had changed, unlike John. Now, there's brilliant programs going on in all prisons around the country. I think it's important to acknowledge that. But for me, what I think the difference is in the Unfucked movement is that it's based on choice. It's not a reward on the record, it's a reward inside them. And the opportunity is that when they become a clean fish, that they filter the community. So we have an opportunity to change two parts of the cycle now. Early intervention, focusing that money spend on what we're doing. We have now prisoners who are putting their hand up and want to change. And we can take and extract all the patterns and the values and the self-beliefs from them. And we can go into communities and say, look, there's John. He potentially has these red lights. He's the same as this guy in Mountjoy. Let's intervene. Let's make a difference. And the guys that graduate from the program and reintegrate in society, we want to develop an app so that they stay connected with their new perspective in life. Because you just don't know what happens when you clean a fish. You just don't know. I was very fortunate that I had the GAA, my local GAA club, Ballymun Kickham's. I had one person believe in me. One person that seen all the negative energy I had because my brother was an addict. And he said, right, let's get that energy, Paddy Christie, let's get that energy and let's put it into sport. And when you clean a fish and you drop them back in the pond, it has a ripple effect. And without that one person listening to me or putting a bit of time into me, I wouldn't be here talking to you today. So please, make this your halftime talk. If you've any influence in helping people, do it, because you never know what comes out of it. Thanks very much.